Okay, picking up where I left off before the holidays. I scavenged the complete tail panel out of the Dodge Challenger and got everything I need here. Got the center tail panel that was attached to the deck lid, which has this little button for releasing the trunk. I got both tail lights out of the sides of the quarter panels. I've got the this is the backup camera that came out of the back of the spoiler. This is the latch. I usually turn these upside down in order to get them to work with these Charger deck lids, these old Charger deck lids. The problem with working on this newer car that I hadn't had to deal with on the last three projects, 2006, 2010, 2011, is that the tail lights were all incandescent bulbs. So there was no issue of changing out the bulbs and putting them into the older housings and retrofitting everything, and it all worked fine. Same with the headlights. But as you can see from this housing here, if your tail light went out, you have to replace this entire housing. There are no bulbs sticking out of the back of this thing. There's just a plug here, so this is probably circuit boards and LEDs, but there's literally nothing to really adapt, unless there's probably an LED panel back there, but it's not as easy to adapt all of that in an older housing. A simple hole with an incandescent bulb in it's real easy. So anybody thinking about doing this with newer vehicles, I don't know when they started using these VIN specific tail lights that have to be replaced in their entirety, but something you have to look out for. Creates a little bit of an issue if you want to put them into the old housings. We're going to use this entire tail panel because we're doing a resto mod, but if this was a more conventional looking car, I definitely would have my hands full with this little project. Alright, so I want to try to start fitting the tail light panel in to the back here. So I want to create a sheet metal box that will receive it. And the first thing I got to do is take a little bit of this excess sheet metal off here. Now that's a detail that pretty much defines the rear of the Dodge Charger. So later on I'll be reintroducing that little feature where it comes across, it goes up and then comes back down over there, because that's really, to me, one of the looks of the Charger that really makes it stand out even on the modern Chargers. And this box pretty much goes straight across, so we'll have to work that in as we go, but that'll be done with the bumper structure. But anyway, so I have to create a sheet metal box in here to slide this whole thing into, so I kind of got to sneak up on it. First things first, I got to trim off this little bit of steel that's sticking up right here. Okay, what I've also done is I've taken and trimmed this plastic piece off the very top of this module here, and that gives me a little bit more room to slide it in. I may have to cut a little bit more of this plastic away, but right now I don't want to do that. I don't want to weaken these little towers, these little towers here, because these are your attachment points. There's 4 of them across, so these will just poke through the back of that sheet metal box and hopefully tighten up. I may have some issues in here where I have to do some modification, because we have to get the latch in here, and this whole thing protrudes back through the hole pretty far, and we'll see how that all works out. Alright, with the taillight housing on the bench sitting flat, I've decided to use this as a base to start planning out my the sheet metal box that I'm going to use to attach all this to the car. First things first, though, while this was still in the Dodge Challenger, I put a level on the top of that box right there, and it was pretty much dead level with the car sitting at its normal ride heights, so that the angle is a smart level. I've taken this and put it on the tail light in this direction, and I've got 84 degrees of tilt from top to bottom, from this rim to that rim. And the reason that's important is because, you know, these are designed to cast in a certain direction relative to the car's attitude. So I got to be within a couple of degrees of attitude. I don't want to, you know, tilt it too far forward. You know, will it be pointing up to the sky or tilting down towards the ground? I have to try to get them to be in the attitude in the new car as they were in the car they came out of. Also, the thing I had to do was measure to the ground in the front of the rocker and the rear of the rocker to get to see the difference in the ride height front to rear. And what I did was, since I don't really need a level plane anymore for what I'm doing, it's more important to me that this car be at the attitude that it's going to be when it's body swapped over here. So I have to match the frame rail here front to rear. It's about an inch difference. So I boosted this jack stand in the front by an inch, so the whole car is sitting hopefully very close to the attitude that it'll have once it's put down on to the Challenger frame. And the reason for that, of course, is, like I said, I'm using a level to get the degree of angle that the taillights have to project. So it's important to get the car at the same attitude. All right, to start planning out this sheet metal box that's going to contain this center light housing, what I first did was set this on the table upside down. Got my 85-degree angle back in this direction. The table is going to represent a 90-degree angle for the top of the box, and then we're taking in this plane here where these attachment points are. So I just bolted up some half-inch plywood to that so that it would maintain its shape. I also cut out a piece of 1/8-inch Lexan to there's these little bump outs here on the light fixture, and there's ones on the end light fixtures also. Rather than grind them off, I'm going to put this 1/8-inch Lexan on the floor of the sheet metal box when it's all done, in order to space this up so that it misses these two little inset tabs. So with that in place, I'm able to get the angle of the floor of the box with this adjustable carpenter's angle finder, and that gives me the angle. Now it's got a downhill, when you turn this over, it'll have a downhill slope, which will allow any water that gets into that fixture to just run out of the back of the car. Anyway, that's the beginning of it anyway. Okay, so this is what the box is starting to look like. This is the top of the box. The floor, as you can see, is slanted down towards me, and these are the holes for the studs that secure the taillight fixture into the back of this box. You can see that these are at a different plane, about a 1/2-inch difference, these over here than these, and I'll show you what that looks like over here. In other words, these center studs are not in the same plane as these outer studs here. So these two over here, these two are in the same plane, then these two here are in the same plane. I'm going to cut out this little alignment stud because I don't need it, and I'm probably going to end up cutting out the back of that box and stepping it in one more time so that I have enough room to mount my latch in there. So I'll just keep going with it and see where it takes us from here. Okay, so this is what I've got so far as the box is concerned. To contain the center unit, the floor on this is sloped down, so if anything gets in the way of water into the box, it's going to flow out over this little ridge here. I put this little shrunken stretch, this little L-shaped ridge here to define the curvature of the light housing, but it also keeps the light housing, there's a lip on it, it keeps it from going in any further, so it kind of controls the edge, and it gives me something to work to as far as finishing it out and connecting it to the car. I put two sides on the box to box it in, to keep it rigid top to bottom, keep that spacing right, and now I have to build boxes for the taillights themselves. I'll have to come back and figure out where the latch goes as far as the catch mechanism and how far back into the box I have to cut it so that I don't have to do double work and create some kind of an attachment point. If I put that in at the right distance, hopefully it'll line up with the catch pocket up here in the deck lid. But that's where we're at right now, and I think this phone has decided it doesn't want to focus anymore. So just another little joy coming along here. Anyway, on to the next thing. Okay, with this center housing in place, what I've done is this rim that I shrunk and stretched to follow the curve of this entire light housing. I've got a little temporary prop here that's adjustable. Now this front rim is meant to catch the back side of this fixture here. So what I'm trying to get now is to make sure that the bottom of this box aligns in a way where once this is set in, that this housing has a correct seam between this housing and the housing that's already in it. So running that up against there like that and raising and lowering that puts me in the right attitude so I can start to create that box for the end taillight. Well, I wish there was a scientific way to tell you how to do all this, but it's more or less, this whole thing here is the hunt and peck method over here. So I basically made my floor, my back wall, and my top based on the rough dimensions of the taillight housing itself. And now I've got it kind of mocked into place to where this leading edge here, I've cut it to fall in the step on this little leading edge that I created, and I've got it boosted with these two stobs to hold everything in place, and I've got it temporarily tacked at the top so that the back wall is vertical, to match the back wall of this box here. Now it goes in deeper. It's kind of a progressive stair stepping with this box because there's a curve in the front, but the boxes are more or less square at the back. So what I've got is, the first thing I've got is I've drilled my clearance hole for my first stud after I slid the housing in, and what I did was basically just take just a paint marker and load up the stud with a little paint on the tip, and then I pushed it back in and drilled an oversized hole right there. I did the same. Once that was clear, then this stud here is offset a little bit, so this one had to go in first before this one would even touch. So this one here, you can see the pink mark from the paint marker. That shows me where my two studs have to be drilled out. So I'm going to slide the whole housing back in there and double check everything, double check the attitude before I proceed with anything else. Okay, so the geometry of this pocket here has been figured out. Just a bunch of trial fittings, tack it in, cut the tacks, take it back out, adjust it, and so forth. That's pretty much how that process went. But we have a couple holes in the back. Instead of stepping this box, I put a 3/16. I just put a 3/16 spacer here, and that should take up the slack and make it at the same plane with this, so that the box back can be squared up and remain square. I also had a clearance for this plug. Used the same method, just put a little wet paint on it, pushed it in, and made a mark, and then I made an oversized hole for clearance for this electrical connection right here for the taillight. Anyway, that all goes in here. that. And let's tighten this up over here on the back side with these pieces that came off the Challenger that hold the taillights in normally. Plastic wing nuts. Anyway, that's what it looks like in place. Now I went ahead and before I tacked that all back in there, I traced everything out on my my opposite side piece so that I cut down on some of the time. That one probably took me a couple hours to put together. Hopefully this one won't take me as long because I have everything already clearanced and everything already drilled out. Okay, so that's what it looks like with all of the pods in and secured. So everything's adjusted. There's a lot of work still left to do. I got to pull everything back off, pull that whole box out, weld it, cap it, a bunch of other things. I have to try and locate the latch first and see how that's all going to work out. See what I got to clear on the back of the box while I got it out. Then I have to seal it and paint it and everything before I put it back in. Then there's a ton of work that has to be done around the perimeter and to tie everything in, blend everything in with the back of the deck lid. So there's got to be a lot of work to do some transitions. I have to try to work in the button that opens the trunk. In this area, I also have to try and locate the backup camera up in that section. It's really tight, so I got a lot of ciphering to do there. But anyway, that's what that looks like. So on to the next thing, as they say. Just thought I'd let you see what it looks like now that I've taken the lenses out. There's got a divider there and a divider there. These are recesses over here. All of this is stepped out to accommodate each one of those light fixtures. I just wanted to show you that before I pull the whole thing back apart. Alright, so this is going to be one of the more complicated tasks of this tailpiece because it requires a pretty good amount of shaping of this corner piece over here, this transition piece. Now what I started out initially was I got some heavy tin foil and I just pushed it into the shape of the existing tail panel. You can see that's quite a deep shape there that has to be mashed into a piece of sheet metal. And then there's a flange around the outside, and then there's a flange. The flange has a little diversion right here where it changes direction, and then of course it flattens out, and that will fit in right here to go around this tail light and transition the sheet metal to the back side of the tail light. At any rate, so it's pretty much a long process that just requires a lot of patience, and I'll show you a little bit of that right now. Okay, so all I'm going to do right now is this is the tail piece, the stock tail piece I should say, and I'm starting out with just a piece of sheet metal, and I'm just rolling it in so that it complies with this face, and then there's a tighter roll down at the bottom here. So get that like that and get that set in. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to shrink all of this material up until I can create this cup. And there's two ways of going about it. You could either take this piece and try to stretch a pocket into it, or basically pull all this metal back and tuck it in. And it's a lot of shrinking, but we're going to give it a try and see how it goes. Here's what I mean about shrinking the material over, trying to get this thing to dome up. As you can see, it starts to gather it up and pull everything around like that. So I have this shape here, and now I'm just trying to pull all of this up and around rather than try to beat a hole into this and stretch this all out. Alright, so I've got the basic shape. just roughed in here, so that fits in there like that. So now what I'll do is I'll try to take the I've got a nylon hammer here, and I've got this sand mag over here, and what I'll do is I'll refine this area here and get it to fit a little snugger on the inside here, and then I'll smooth it out on the English wheel. Alright, I'll just show you a little bit of the smoothing operation with the English wheel. Okay, all it's doing is averaging out all of those faceted marks that, from the shrinking stretcher, is where this is all gathered up on the edges and stuff like that. Try and get it a little more of a regular shape. But anyway, I have to go back now that that's smoothed out. This distorted it a little bit. I have to straighten it out and fit it back in there, make sure it's still where I want it to be. Alright, it's pretty much what I was looking for as far as this shape is concerned. So now I'll just trim it out around the perimeter here where there's a flat flange here, and I'll go ahead and cut out a flange, and I'll add the flange to it. Alright, I just got it tacked into place right now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start kind of clearancing it for the lens and get all that straightened away. I've got it set even with the back of the deck lid over here, back edge of the deck lid, and just kind of sneak my way up on it and fit it up. Alright, well, that's what it looks like, just kind of trimmed in there, and I've got to smarten it up a little bit around the edges, and then I've got to build out this whole corner here. See how that all goes, and then rinse and repeat on the other side. Okay, with the this piece in and the lens back out so I don't accidentally burn it up with the welding spatter, I've added this piece of 060 steel to the top to replicate the little cap that normally would go on here, the aluminum cap. So I've extended the quarter panel out to match the edge of the deck lid, and so now I have to put a facing piece to connect from here all the way around, and these are just tacked on right now. Eventually this will be welded up, but for right now I want this all be able to come back out, so I'll be cutting these tacks loose once I get this all established, and I do some work on the inside over here also. Alright, so that's what it looks like with the end capped off there, and still lots of work to do there, but I think I need to get over to the other side, get it caught up to at least to this stage here before I move on and do anything else. So it's going to be a rinse and repeat, and we'll get back to you when that's done. Alright, so this is what it looks like with the left and right corner closeouts pretty much done. There's still a lot of work that has to be done to this box. I know I jump around a little bit from what I say I'm intended to do, but it's one of those processes where you intend to do one thing and then you look at it and you say, well, I got to do this first, or you don't see it till you get to it. So if some of my earlier narratives don't work out, it's just because I film as I go along, and you're following the process as I develop it. At any rate, I have to now figure out how to incorporate the backup camera and the button that opens up the trunk lid into this center unit so that it's serviceable. In other words, it has to be connected to that unit so that when you slide this center tail light section out, the camera and that button will come out with it. So I got to work that out. Everything is, really close in there, and so it's going to take some ciphering to make sure that we don't get bound up. But lots left to do here. I've got to put the pistons to hold the deck lid up. And again, once again, I'll refer to the latch. I keep talking about it, but I got to get to the latch system while I have access to it. And then, of course, I've got to develop the bumper system. The bumper is going to be, a modernized version of the tail panel that's already on the Charger, which is going to accommodate the proximity sensors that are used along the bottom edge, and they have to be put in at a specific angle, and they can't have any obstructions left or right, so that they'll pick up anything side to side. So they have to be flush mounted, so that means that I have to have a more vertical bottom of the bumper than is normally seen on a regular Charger, where it rolls under very quickly. So there's going to have to be a flattish section in there, and I'll have to see how that looks and develop all that out. If you're wondering why I'm spending all this time on this kind of fabrication and not just putting the two cars together like I did in my last build, Don went through the trouble of having most of the fabrication, as far as the body was concerned, completed before I got to it, which was real nice. Then I could go directly to the splicing of the two cars. This one has got a lot of custom work here, and because it's a Daytona, and also because it's a resto mod, and it will be wide-bodied eventually. The logic is I've got to do a lot of this dirty work, or I'd like to do a lot of this dirty work as far as grinding, cutting, welding, without putting any hazard to the donor car, because there's going to be wiring in there, and of course the engine looks spotless. I don't want to get all that garbage on that car until it's absolutely necessary. So any kind of fabrication I can get done on this part of the body before I drop this body down on that car, I'm going to continue to do that. And so anybody who's looking for the splice, it's going to be a little bit down the road here. Anyway, I thank you for tuning in again and taking a look at my work, and I appreciate you watching, and I'll see you on the next one.